there is a message that is even harder and in many cases less welcome for people to hear. And that is that if we're going to stop children being sexually abused, if we're going to have fewer victims, ideally none, then we need to think about how we help perpetrators as well. What do you mean you don't want to talk about it? This is your child coming to you and saying, this happened to me and I need to tell you you're my parent. I need to tell you I am hurt. I am broken. So yeah, I guess that's in a nutshell my story. That's the short version of it. It was like a switch had been flipped and the entire world, my entire existence, the universe I lived in was never the same again. There was before that first time and there was after that first time. I just knew that everything was different.
Hi everyone, and welcome back to the Be Brave Project podcast. I'm so glad to be back. I've had a few weeks off over the Christmas holidays to have a bit of a break, ground myself, do a bit of self-care, and I'm now back. And the first person I've got on today, the guest, is Mark O'Sullivan. So Mark is a survivor, a creative, and a powerful advocate. He is a comedian, an actor, writer, director, and the creator of Making Lemonade, a project that takes some of the hardest experiences a person can live through and turns them into honest human stories that help others feel less alone. Through his work, Mark speaks openly about trauma, PTSD, and survival, using creativity, humour, and truth to start conversations that so many people are still afraid to have. So, Mark, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate your time and honesty today. So today we're going to talk about PTSD, trauma healing, and your creativity work that you've been doing. To begin, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and who you are and what you do now?
Yeah, I think you've just done it better than I ever did it, actually. That was the best introduction I've heard. I might have to steal it and pretend I wrote that, if that's okay.
Absolutely. Yeah, of course.
Something I do. I just want to be really responsive about that. Yeah, I do lots of things. I've always been a creative person. I've always been interested in performance, whether that's live or on screen. And as you said right at the beginning, I'm also a survivor of sexual abuse, among some other things. And I've learned how to use that stuff in my work, which has been the most fulfilling thing I've ever done. And that in turn has sort of opened up doors to becoming, as you said, a bit of an advocate and someone with a voice to speak about what happened to me and what happens to other people and the sort of general state of things out there for us survivors. And I'm really keen to use my voice and my little platform to raise awareness of what this thing is and how it affects us and how that in turn affects everybody. Because I think it's really easy to think, oh, isn't that terrible, that thing that's happened to other people? And it is, of course, but everyone in our society is affected by it one way or another. And explaining that to people and opening people's eyes to that is really important, I think.
Definitely. That's so true that it affects everyone. I think when it comes to child sexual abuse, people don't tend to think that it does affect them, but it does in some way or another. And I think that's really true, what you just said. You obviously wear a lot of different hats: comedian, writer, director, producer, now podcast host yourself. What made you think, with your experiences when you were a child, and where did you think, I need to use creativity to make sense of what happened to me?
Oh, that's such a good question. I think I was always creative, always. I was always making up worlds and things in my head. And looking back now, I can say with pretty much complete certainty that it was probably an escape from my life and some of the more horrible things that were happening in my childhood. It was definitely, an escape, a way of coping with those things. And then it became a way of being accepted by people. I remember in secondary school, in particular, I was the funny one. And that was great because that was a way to A, get people to like me, and B, it meant I could be weird. And it was just, oh, Mark's a bit weird because he's a bit quirky and a bit funny. And actually, even though I probably wasn't saying it to myself in my head like this at the time, I was weird because I felt completely broken and different. And rather than just being this really odd, silent thing in a corner, I went the other direction, and I was big and slightly absurd and ridiculous and silly and a bit sarcastic. And I would sort of seek out the humor in any situation, not always in a welcome way. Everybody, I'm sure I got it wrong and probably still get it wrong even now. But yeah, that's what creativity was for me. And then it became my work and my career. And I'm very lucky to have had that and to still be doing stuff that, to get paid for doing this, is kind of, you go, this is incredible. And isn't someone about to come and tap me on the shoulder and say, excuse me, you shouldn't be here doing this? But then the biggest sort of shift has been in the last sort of 3 or 4 years. Well, no, actually slightly longer than that, because one of the other things that happened to me when I was still very young was my dad died really suddenly when I was 15, completely out of the blue. And obvious thing to say, but I adored my dad. I really adored him. And that loss has shaped so much of who I am, and still does, and shapes who I am as a person, who I am as a father. And so about 5 or 6 years ago, I started writing about that, and that became my first drama series on TV, a series called Tell Me Everything. And doing that made me realise that actually I'd been holding my own experiences probably subconsciously at arm's length. I'd been not letting them too close to my work. And actually the moment when I did let it into my work felt really healing. There were things like so the main character in Tell Me Everything was a present day version of me, but a much cooler version than I was in real life. But I set it in my actual hometown, Welwyn Garden City, and pretty much unbeknownst to me, in the first episode, spoiler alert, the boy's dad dies suddenly, and we filmed the funeral, and they actually ended up filming the funeral in the church that my dad's funeral took place.
Wow.
And lots of people said to me at the time and after, said, oh my God, that must have been awful. And it wasn't. It was beautiful. It was really wonderful. It felt, I'm remembering my dad. I'm remembering that bond, and I'm doing it in this really unique, way. And it's a privilege to be able to do this. And it just felt really lovely. And so around that same time, I started thinking about the sexual abuse that I'd experienced, and I realised I wanted to do something with that.
That's amazing. I think I was really creative as well, but I did it in a completely different way. I was really quiet. And when I used to tell people that I was an actor, they'll be like, really? Like, don't come across like that at all. Because I was so quiet and so introverted. And I used to see the people that were really out there and funny. And I used to be thinking, I wish I could be like that. And I think an element of what happened to me was because I was like that. But I also think I was like that before my abuse happened. And I definitely think that's why he preyed on me, because I was so tiny and so small and so quiet and meek and mild. But yeah, I envied people that were so out there and funny and could just, I know obviously you were doing it to mask things that were happening to you. And it's just funny, isn't it, how people deal with it in very different ways. I think what you've done is incredible. And I love My Sexual Abuse, the sitcom. I think I was really, when I went to go and watch it, I was umming and ahhing because I thought, am I going to find this funny, or am I going to really I couldn't quite work it out. But actually when I sat down and watched it, I was laughing my head off. It was so funny because you're taking something so not nice, let's face it, it's horrific, and you're turning it into something comical, and you've got humor behind it, and it could have felt completely differently, but I thought it was brilliant. And I think sometimes actually turning something so dark and deep into humor sometimes actually helps the situation. And that must have been really healing for you as well.
It was. And I've just got to pick up on something you said a moment ago, because you saying that you were envious of those people who were loud and out there. And because I think I've always been envious of the people who are more like what you're describing yourself, because so many times in my life, I've exhausted myself by being up and out there all the time, because I feel like if I don't do that, bad stuff happens. And I've always been very envious of people who are quieter and more reserved. It's weird, isn't it? How
It is.
the grass is always a bit greener on the other side. And
Yeah.
Making the documentary and sitcom were, well, and I always feel weird saying this, but it is true, the happiest experience I've had in television. And I've worked in television for the last sort of 10 years or so, although I'm working more in theatre these days, which is lovely. And probably from your experience in television, that it's a hard world and it's often not a very nice world. And there are reasons for that. There's so much pressure, so much competition, but actually it's unnecessarily horrible a lot of the time. And I had some great experiences in my TV work, and some really awful ones that pushed me to the brink mental health wise. But making a documentary and accompanying sitcom about the sexual abuse I endured as a child was actually one of the happiest experiences I've ever had, which sounds completely counterintuitive. It was working with brilliant people who were supportive and sensitive and kind and encouraging, and being able to do something, what doesn't often happen, especially in TV, in my experiences, you don't often, you set out with an idea and you don't often actually get to make the thing that you had in your head. And with that, not only did I make the thing in my head, it was better than what I had in my head. And I was allowed to do it, and I still had brilliant people around me helping to make it better and saying, what if, or what about this? But it was a very sort of pure creative experience, actually.
I can imagine it would be really healing. When you're saying it might sound strange that it was one of the best times in my career, I get that, because it's a very different situation, but doing this podcast, I've been wanting to do this for so many years, and I just haven't, one, had the time, I think, but also mostly, I think, had the courage to do it. But now I'm in it and I'm telling people, and when they ask me what the podcast is about, I'm always a little bit like, oh, do I actually say it's about child sexual abuse? Because let's face it, most people are a bit like, oh, really? Are you actually talking about that? I don't know if they're going to listen, but it's been so healing.
Yeah.
And so inspiring, talking to people that are like me. And it can be such an isolating experience. And when you're doing something creative and you've got people around you that are supportive, it's incredibly healing. So I can imagine when you're saying that, I completely get it, because this is like my creative outlet, the podcast, and it's been great. I'm enjoying it so much. Yeah, it's tough, and then I'm having to really take care of myself because I'm taking on a lot of other people's stories, and I've got to be very careful. But I'm thoroughly enjoying it. And when I explain that to people, they can, you're enjoying hearing people's. I am, because I don't feel alone anymore. And it's just wonderful.
I love that. I completely get that. And you're making lemonade. And that's the thing that I've been, shameless plug for my podcast, Making Lemonade. But the reason it's called that is because one of my best friends, when I got the sitcom commissioned and the documentary commissioned, she said, oh my God, you're making a sitcom about being sexually abused. That's the ultimate example of when life gives you lemons, make lemonade. And I thought, it isn't it? Because we're taking something awful and horrible and we're turning it into something good and important and worthwhile and healing. And why shouldn't we? Shouldn't we do that?
Absolutely.
And why shouldn't we enjoy it as well? Because we've had enough joy taken away from us. Let's find it where we can.
Absolutely. That's really lovely to hear, because also I think there's a massive part of me that hasn't wanted to do this because I felt a little bit of guilt about doing it, if that makes any sense, where I think, oh, should I be doing this? Should I be enjoying this? And should I be talking about it? And when you've just said that, it's gone, actually, yeah, I should be enjoying it because we've had so much shit. So absolutely, we should make something good out of it. So yeah, definitely.
Good. I'm pleased about that.
Do you want to discuss a little bit more about your story and what happened to you? And then we can go into the other sort of trauma elements and the PTSD and stuff like that.
Of course. It's funny, isn't it? Because probably like you, I've spoken about what happened to me a lot now. And there are two things that happen when I talk about it. One is that I kind of naturally go into that groove of explaining it the way I've explained it 100 times. But there's always a bit of you going, I'm describing child sexual abuse here, and that's awful. And lots of people won't know what that looks and feels and sounds like. So I've always got these two things in my head. It's not a script, but it sort of almost is as well. And I'm really conscious of it not being like that, if that makes sense, because it's so big and powerful and important. So I'm like the majority of victims in many ways, and the abuse that I suffered was in a sort of family domestic setting, and it started, I can never totally easily pinpoint exactly how old I was, but I think I was around 11 or 12. And I was the youngest of 4 children by some way. Like, my eldest sibling was 12 years older than me. And I think I may have been a bit of an accident, but that's fine. I'm cool with that. A happy accident, I hope. And we were a strange family, not very cohesive in lots of ways. We had sort of allegiances and teams. So me and my dad were very close. Me and my mum were closer after he died, I think. But because there was quite a gap between me and my siblings, I was never terribly close to them growing up. But actually, my eldest sibling, my eldest sister, because she was 12 years older than me, she looked after me a lot when I was very young. And so me and her were very close, actually. And she met a guy when I was probably 6, 7, 8 years old, and he came into our lives. And there was lots of other stuff in my early childhood, not just early, that already started that wasn't very nice. And when he came into our lives, and I loved my sister very much, it was like, oh, these two people, I get to spend time with them, and I get to go out and do things with them that I hadn't got to do. There was very much that kind of youngest child syndrome where everything had been done in the family already, and there's not really any money left for anything else, or kind of energy for anything for you. And so suddenly I was being treated loads and taken out places by my sister and him. And it got to the point where I just absolutely loved being with them, and being with him, and felt really special. And then he and my sister had a child, and it's funny how you rationalize things at the time. I was encouraged to help them out because my sister was a nurse, and he was a really heavy sleeper, I was told. And would I go and stay around there while she was working nights when the child was very young, and so that I could hear if the baby cried or whatever. And of course, no problem for me at all. I wanted to help them out. And that was when it started. I was staying over. It's funny how, looking back, you go, oh, all the pieces were there, weren't they, actually? All the thing, I was groomed, didn't know it at the time, and don't remember saying those words to myself till about 10 years ago, actually. But I was groomed in a very, I guess, quite a sort of regular way, if there's any such thing as a regular way to groom a child. And yeah, it's like most of us, the first time something happened, it was like a switch had been flipped, and the entire world, my entire existence, the universe I lived in, was never the same again. There was before that first time, and there was after that first time. And so, yeah, it happened. I didn't know what had happened. I didn't understand what had happened. I couldn't put it into words because I didn't know what those words would be. I just knew that everything was different. And then it happened quite a few times over a number of years. And I had always promised myself, and I actually said to him when I was older, I said, if I ever find out you've done it to anyone else, I'm going straight to the police. And about 15, 16 years ago, that's exactly what happened. I found out, I got a phone call from someone else in our family saying he's done it to this person as well. And the next day I went to the police, which ultimately ended up, he was charged and there was a big court case and he went to prison, and it put a lightning bolt through our already shattered family because both of our parents had died by then. And yeah, so I know my story is really typical of lots of people. It's someone who no one would suspect, and it's in a place where you should feel completely safe. And I did try to tell my mum. She was ill after she died 5 years after my dad died. She was really ill for those 5 years. And once when she was in hospital, I thought, I'd started drinking. I was about 16, 17, and I could feel myself sliding downwards. And I thought, I'm going to tell her. And I remember trying to tell her, and she just stopped me and said, oh, I don't want to talk about this. And for many years, I thought, oh, she was really ill and she died a couple of years later. And of course she didn't. But actually, the older I get, and since I've had my own children, the angrier I've got about that. Because I think, what do you mean you don't want to talk about it? This is your child coming to you and saying, this happened to me and I need to tell you you're my parent. I need to tell you I am hurt. I am broken. So, yeah, I guess that's in a nutshell my story. That's the short version of it. But like most of us, it has in one way or another shaped my entire life. Who I am, what I do, how I feel, how I react, how I see myself, how I see others, how I see the world.
Do you think when your mum said that, do you think she had any idea, or do you think it was just literally she just didn't want to talk about it? Because when you said that, I felt, oh, is it because she knew something?
That's a really, really good question. And I am sort of in the same place as you in that I suspect she maybe had an inkling. For whatever reason, we were working class Catholic family, stuff like that. You say stuff like that doesn't happen, but of course in the Catholic Church and other organisations, it happens all the fucking time. And it's just easier for people, isn't it, to pretend it isn't happening and to look the other way.
100%. Brush it under the carpet. Let's not talk about it.
And then burn the carpet.
Yeah.
So maybe, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing your story. I know you were saying you've done it many times, but it still is never easy tapping into it. So I appreciate you being so open and honest. And I say this to every person that I've spoken to when they've shared their story. I'm so sorry it happened to you. And I know that those words fall flat sometimes because it doesn't make it any better.
I love that you say that, because I think we met last year, didn't we, at the NSPCC event? And I think one of the things I shared there was something I'd started saying to people, which is it shouldn't have happened.
Yeah.
And I started saying those because, and I know it's something we're going to talk about in a while, but when I went and did a therapeutic dose of magic mushrooms with therapy in the Netherlands, I said it out loud to myself during that trip, and I realised no one had ever said it to me before.
Yeah.
So I love that you say that. I really do.
Good. I'm glad. Because I when people say it to me as well, I think I know that they don't really know what to say. And the only thing that they can say is, I'm so sorry. And I'm so sorry that happened to you. I'm so sorry. And it's like when they're grieving someone that they love and you think, oh, I'm so sorry for your loss. And you think that's probably not the right thing to say. Like, what is the right thing to say? But yeah, I'm so sorry it happened to you. And it's shit. It's really shit. So yeah, thank you for sharing it and being so honest and open. I do really want to talk about your trip to Amsterdam, when you were talking about that when we met last year. And I've still, since hearing you talk about it, I've been wanting to do it. There's an element of me being scared, I think, but I do think I will definitely do it at some point. Not sure when, but we will definitely touch on that. But I want to go on to, as you've obviously spoken about your story and what happened to you, and you've talked about trauma. And you talk about that a lot in your speeches and stuff, and how it's shaped you and who you are. And I wanted to touch on that because you mentioned what happens to us. It shapes who we become, how we react. I think that's a massive one because I'm such a reactor and I'm really trying to work on it, especially when I'm around my daughter. I do definitely react, not just her, just anyone actually. and who it's made me who I am today. And I always wonder, who would I have been if it hadn't have happened, and all of that sort of stuff. But I want to talk about PTSD because it's something that I really find quite interesting. So when did you first realize that PTSD was part of your experience?
I have had diagnosed depression and anxiety for decades, and I've been on medication for it for decades. And I think medication is a really good thing, because it actually, when I first started taking Prozac, I think it was over 20 years ago, it changed my life, because it gave me a balance I'd never had before. So PTSD, there was a moment, I can almost pinpoint the moment, and it was probably in the sort of year or so before I made the documentary, when I work from home a lot, and this is the room that I do most of my work, most of my writing in. And I realised, this is going to sound really odd, but I realised I try never to stand near any window when I'm inside a house or a building. So it's very rare for me to stand in front of that window over there. This one I can't stand in front of because my desk is here, but also that it looks out onto the back of my house. But I realised I never hover near windows, and I suddenly thought, why is that? And then as soon as I asked myself that question, I got the answer, and it was, obviously, in case someone shoots me. And that answer came back, and I heard it in my head as,
obviously,
in case someone shoots you with a gun. And I thought, okay, that's interesting, because I've never been in the military at all. There is zero chance of me ever being anywhere near the military in any shape or form. I'd be useless, for one thing. And B, I've never been in a war zone or near a war zone, and I've never held a gun. I don't think I've ever seen a real gun in my life. But this very real feeling of, if you stand in the window, there's a fair old chance someone's going to shoot you. I realised I'd had that in the back of my head for as long as I could remember.
Wow.
I suddenly thought, that's not right, is it?
No, probably
It's not normal, whatever normal is. So I decided to go and get a diagnosis of something. I thought it might be PTSD. I'd always thought I was bipolar, actually, but then I started thinking about PTSD, and I paid for a psychiatrist sort of session where they take you through whatever the procedure is. And at the end, he said, yes, I'm able to diagnose that you have PTSD. And I started reading about it. I'd already started reading a bit, but I read more, and I thought, suddenly I make sense. I'm not just shit. My body and brain are reacting in ways that are completely in line with what PTSD is. My body has been in fight or flight or freeze for as long as I can remember, since I was a child. And fucking hell, it's exhausting. And everything feels like an attack. Every little disappointment on a day-to-day basis feels like the world is caving in. Every bit of disapproval from anyone or rejection from anyone is the end of the world. Suddenly all of that made sense. And that's quite a shift, isn't it? To go from, I am just rubbish, to, there is a reason why I'm feeling like this. It's because I've been permanently on guard, vigilant for an attack. And attacks can come in any shape or size or disguised as anything else. And I'm being attacked every hour of every day by one thing or another. So it just made sense.
Yeah.
And so much of that stuff has shaped who I am and how I react to things. It's interesting you saying about how you are with your child. And there've been so many things over the years that I can now go, my reaction to that with my child was absolutely what was going on for me psychologically with this. And so I've become more and more interested in ways of dealing with or healing or eliminating these symptoms and these things that sort of drive me. That I always think of it as like the iOS, the operating system underneath everything. The stuff we do in our lives, the stuff we add on, they're the apps, but it's the operating system. It's part of, because it was introduced so early, It's just been part of that, but you can rewrite it. There are things you can do to it. And one of the things is so much of it lives in our bodies as well as our minds. And so I've done things that are body-based therapies. Oh, what's it called? Oh no, this is another thing about getting at middle age is you just forget stuff all the time. TRE, trauma release.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've tried that. But
Never tried it. I think that was at the NSPCC. Someone was there talking about it. Yeah.
Remember?
Yeah.
So that's
again something that I would probably be a little bit scared about doing though. Because there's so many things that I would like to do, but I think you have to be 100% ready to do it. But I think it's fascinating.
I agree with you, and I wasn't for a long time, but I have been more recently. And then the other thing I did was I started reading and watching things like Michael Pollan's work on Netflix about psychedelics and how they're increasingly being used around the world to treat mental health conditions. And I saw that magic mushrooms, psilocybin, the sort of the chemically bit in them, were being used more and more to treat things like PTSD in different trials around the world. Lots of countries and states within countries have decriminalized it for therapeutic use. And of course we haven't, because we're lagging behind, because why on earth would we do something that someone else has proven to be really effective? Because we know what we're doing. We just don't talk about it. And yeah, I looked up after I'd made the documentary and had some little bit of money in the bank. I want to do something about it. I don't want to live with this as I am. And so I found a company. There were many. I did lots of research. I found a company, an organization in the Netherlands who do therapeutic psilocybin sessions, and they do group sessions. But I thought, if I've got the ability to do it, I'm going to do a one-to-one session. And I went to the Netherlands. I went to a little eco cabin on the outskirts of Amsterdam by a lake. And I stayed there 2 nights. And on the middle day between the 2 nights, the 2 therapists came along with the magic mushrooms, and we spoke and made the tea together. And then I drank it, and I lay in a bed covered in blankets and things, and they played music, and I went to places that I didn't know were possible for about 5-6 hours with them there to support me.
That's a long time.
It is a long time, and I've never experienced anything like it, and it has been completely transformative.
Wow.
More than I can probably do justice to in trying to describe. I'll tell you a little bit about it if that's helpful.
Yeah, definitely.
So, a bit of context. I've done different drugs over the course of my life. I've done all the party ones, and yeah, I'm not very good with. I don't drink anymore. I'm not very good with drink or drugs. I'm a bit too all or nothing in my head. But psychedelics were the thing that I was always terrified of. I'd never done any.
Yeah.
And I think it's because growing up in the 80s on a council estate in Wellingborough City, and I've spoken to loads of people who've had, not from council estates in Wellingborough City, who've had a sort of a similar experience. There was always somebody on your estate who usually lived in a flat above a shop who you were told to stay away from because they'd done LSD in 1972 and they'd never been the same since. And there was this strange bloke who hangs around by the fish and chip shop. Yeah, that's Ferdy. He did LSD in 1972. Never been the same. That's what happens if you do LSD. The idea of psychedelics was just terrifying. And so I was properly scared going and doing it. But I spoke to them. I did lots of research, spoke to lots of people. And the therapists that I worked with out there were just amazing. We had sessions online before I went out there, and then sessions after to integrate what I'd been through. But so I'm lying in this bed thinking with an eye mask on, there's music playing, and I've got a really weak bladder and you have to drink quite a lot of tea. So I had to, sort of throughout this, I had to go to the loo several times. And amazingly, you can come out of the center of the universe and go and do a wee and then sort of go back again. You know, it's kind of, you are in control of it. 2 things that people said to me before I did it were, firstly, that it takes you where you need to go, and secondly, that it's like having a lifetime's worth of therapy in a day. And I thought, let's see what happens with the first one and the second one. I thought, that's bullshit, isn't it? And it wasn't.
Wow.
It absolutely wasn't. So I'm lying in this bed, and I didn't speak to them about what the music was going to be. They just have this playlist. But as I'm lying there, this piece of music comes on that I know really well. I'm a bit of a geek for choral music. A piece that I know really well came on. And as I'm listening to it, I suddenly realized that some of the notes, these chords that were being sung by this choir, were getting longer, like longer than I know they are in real life. And then, this is the first time I knew something was really happening. Not only were they getting longer, but they, and this is going to sound so weird, they were becoming playgrounds in a forest that me and all my friends from my life were going and playing in. But not even visually, just as a sense, as a feeling.
Wow.
I thought, if I have a few hours of this, I'm quite happy. This is nice.
Yeah.
Good music. I'm in a sort of a sensory forest with all of my friends, like the Lost Boys. And then, and I've spoken about this quite a lot, and I've made a little thing about this. I don't know if you've heard it or seen it, but I suddenly found myself in what felt like the catacombs of a castle, like underground in a castle, if you can imagine, pillars of stone and occasional lit torches.
Okay.
It was basically this vast, dark area. You could just make out pillars, and it was space and darkness stretching in every direction. And I became aware that I wasn't alone down there. And it was as real as I'm talking to you now in this room to me. I'm there. And even though I was afraid of whatever it was that was down there with me, I thought, I need to know who it is. And so when I would move, I would sense that they were moving as well, and that they were trying to evade seeing me. And I eventually got to a corner where this person, they either stayed there or they came out in my direction. There was nowhere else for them to go. And I really thought it was going to be the man who sexually abused me. I really thought, I'm going to see him and I'm going to face him. And I waited and waited. And then eventually this figure came out of the darkness towards me. And it wasn't him. It was me as a child.
Wow.
And child me was carrying this sword that was too heavy for him to actually even pick up. And I realized in that moment that when the abuse had happened to me, I had shattered into two. And there was this version of me that grew up and became a comedian and had kids and did things like this. And there was child me forever alone in the darkness, thinking, no one's coming to save me. I need to defend myself. And I'm going to drag this sword around with me. And when I saw myself and realized it, and it was almost instantaneous, this whole kind of thing, I put my arms around child me and I felt complete for the first time in my life.
Oh, wow.
And that was the first of a few things that happened. I know some people can really feel that and resonate with that. I haven't really told many people this next bit. The next bit was, I remember taking child me, and I was like, when I was growing up, there was always a family who felt safer than my family, who had a Volvo estate, and you'd get to sit in the back and like they'd take you places with their kids who you were friends with. And I was suddenly that dad in the Volvo estate. This is so weird. With child me from the castle in the background. And I drove to the house that I was sexually abused in first. And I kicked open the door and I ran upstairs and I grabbed that version of me from that bedroom and I carried him down and took him and made him safe as well.
Oh, I can resonate with all of that. That's why it's making me really emotional, because that's, yeah.
And I didn't know any of that was going to happen. I didn't know I was going to feel any of that. I don't want to upset you. I don't want to upset you anymore, Clay, but I've only told a few people some of this detail, but I'm really happy to share it because it was so amazing, the experience I had. And this is what happened. This is where I went, among other things. But one of the next places I went to was, I went, and I maybe I subconsciously went in thinking about these things. Of course, I wasn't going, oh, I want to go here or I want to go there. It was like, it was going, I know where I need to take. I know where to be. And the next place it took me was to the morning my dad died, and my last moment, my last sort of exchange with him ever, which was when I was 15 and he tried to wake me up before school. And I was a grumpy 15-year-old and I wasn't very nice to him. And he went off to work and I went to school. And later that day, someone came to school to collect me. We got to the hospital. He'd died. And in this version of me in that car, I went to my house and I went to the point where my dad had just left for work. And I got 15-year-old me out of bed and we chased after my dad so that I could tell him I loved him.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it was pretty good.
Yeah, it sounds very good.
It was just amazing. And I think from all of my research into psilocybin, and I've had quite a few talks with some MPs who are trying to get it decriminalised in this country at the moment for therapeutic use as well. Everyone's heard of a bad trip. That doesn't seem to be something that's very common at all with psilocybin. You can have, not sure about that, or nothing really happened. But usually people go from having a nice sort of pleasant, I'm seeing lots of interesting things, to something completely life-changing. And I was definitely on that end of the scale.
Wow. I really want to do it.
You know, if you do it properly and you do it with people who know what they're doing and who get to know you and to understand you and to find out how you need to be supported, I just can't recommend it more highly. And I'm not cured, I'm not renewed, but what it's done long term is it's made me realize that those reactions and those feelings aren't me.
Yeah.
They're something that I'm experiencing. They're not who I am. They're sensations, and they are the operating system doing what it's always done. And all of that could be changed.
Have you felt a huge shift since doing it? When did you do it? How long ago?
It's just over 2 years ago.
Okay.
And it's changed me in lots of ways. I had a massive fear of death for my entire life. I was so scared. And I think that was a PTSD thing as well, actually, just because you're so terrified of everything, not obviously. And then when you've got kids, the idea of leaving your child is just awful. You know, my kids are older and I might feel differently if they were still younger, but I don't fear that anymore. And I just feel so much calmer in so many ways. I still have on a daily basis those reactions and those feelings, and I feel attacked or I feel under attack or I feel I must protect myself. But I'm usually now able to go, I know what's happening here.
Yeah.
And that's a bit
like control those reactions more than
just by
the outbursts.
Them.
Yeah.
Just by going, I know what this is. It's okay.
Yeah.
This isn't the world. This is what's happening inside me at the moment because of that corrupted operating system.
Yeah. I so want to, because I have therapy and I haven't been to a psychiatrist as such to be clinically diagnosed with PTSD, I suppose, but the therapy that I've had and the therapist that I do have, she says, you've got PTSD with all the things that I go through. And when you say you're petrified of dying, I have severe health anxiety, really badly. And any little change in my body, I'm not dying, I'm going to die. And I have it with my daughter really bad. The fear of her dying, but also I think the fear of me leaving her is more, if that makes any sense. It's so consuming as well. And I have got a bit better with it. But then what I find is happening is that I have different PTSD triggers. So one minute I have really bad health anxiety, then that kind of gets a bit better. And then I have at the moment, which is what I'm struggling with really badly, is she's 8 years old, my daughter, and I was 9 when my abuse started. And the age thing and the looking at her little body, and it's like, I see me and, I'm really struggling with it. And I don't want her to be anywhere near any, and I know this is I'm generalizing, but I have a very big fear about men.
Yeah. And
I don't want her anywhere near any of them. People even that I trust. I don't want her anywhere near them. I need to know where she is every minute of every day. I'm not with her dad, so it's really difficult when she's with him and I'm not there. Whole control situation, I'm out of control. And it's a real thing. And I keep having flashbacks and terrible. I'm working through it at the moment. But a massive reason why I want to do what you've done is because for me, and like you were saying, you're not healed. And I'm not expecting to go and do something like this and then suddenly everything that happened to me is completely gone. But to help me, I do understand it, but help me understand it more, if that makes sense. And I know I need to do something because I can't keep living the way that I'm living. It's so consuming. And it's very tricky because even though people around me, I've got an amazing support system. I really do. But I find that they get a little bit frustrated with me because I'm not rational. And I know that I'm not rational when I'm saying all of these things. I don't want Beatrix going around, that's her name, going around to have a play date. I need to be there because I don't know who's going to be there. But I don't know these people. I don't know the dad. And it is more men. And I know that women can be just as bad. But for me, because my abuse was obviously done by a man, it's very much like that. And my mum and other people around me, for goodness sake, Chloe, nothing's going to happen to her. Nothing's going to happen to her. But you don't know that because it happened to me. And I think people are getting frustrated with me. And it was the same when I had my health anxiety. Oh, I've got cancer or I'm going to die. For goodness sake, Chloe, you're not. You're fine. You're fine. I'd go to the A&E. I'd go to the doctors all the time for reassurance and to make sure that nothing was happening, Yeah. So when you were talking about what you experienced and you doing this in Amsterdam or near Amsterdam, I so badly want to. It might not that might not happen to me. I might go there but I really want to try and experience it. There is a fear, definitely. I've never taken drugs, so that's for me. It's like, whoop.
I think that's an okay fear because these things there are ways of doing psychedelics which are really harmful, but certain ones like psilocybin, when done properly, you've got more of a chance of being healed, I think, from everything I've learned, then you've got more of a chance of coming out in a better place than the worst place.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say that I really understand what you're describing there, especially in terms of your feelings about your daughter. When my son turned 15, which was the age at which my dad just dropped dead, me and him had a really bad year, as in we were at loggerheads loads. I was really angry a lot of the time and probably not the best version of me or anywhere near it that I could have been. And almost the moment he turned 16, that changed, that stopped. And I realised that in my mind I'd been, this is it, this is the year, isn't it, when bad things happen.
Yeah.
And I think in lots of ways that is rational because we're basing what we're thinking on what happened to us.
Yeah.
And it did happen to us, whatever it was. But what I've learned is that doesn't for a second mean that it's going to happen to someone else. But we mustn't beat ourselves up for feeling like that and for having those feelings, the undercurrent of that, because that isn't our fault. And our bodies and our minds are actually trying to protect us and the people around us.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean that any of that stuff is true as well. And I guess, really patronising.
No, it's not patronising at all. I think I always say I'm battling with two Chloes on my shoulder. The rational one that's going, for goodness sake, get a grip. And the other one's going, no, because it can happen. And it did happen to you. So why could it not happen to her?
Can I tell you the best bit of advice I ever received for my health anxiety? Because I've gone from a slight pain to cancer within 15 seconds in my head.
Yep.
And the visions of me saying goodbye to my children on my deathbed. All of that.
Planning out my funeral and everything.
Totally.
Yeah.
So the best bit of advice someone gave to me was, when you get that sensation, that pain, that lump, that slightly different thing, wait 3 weeks. And if it's worse, hasn't gone away, or it's worse, or something suddenly gets worse, then you go and speak to someone. But 3 weeks is the time to give it. Usually what happens is you go 3 weeks, okay, you've got 3 weeks, and then you forget thinking about it. And next time you remember, it's not there anymore.
Yeah.
So that's really worked for me. If you'd be sharing that.
No, I think that's great. I have tried that. It doesn't always work. And I stopped the Googling because for me, looking online and Googling was just, I'm very much, if I feel something or see something or something's not right, I say to myself, do not pick up your phone, Chloe. Put it down. And honestly, sometimes I see myself and I'm here and I'm on my phone. I'm thinking, how did I get this in? How am I? I'm like, how did I even do that? And like I said, my health anxiety at the moment, I feel like it's under control, if that's even the word. It probably isn't. It's just in the background waiting to, yeah. And I feel sometimes there's just different triggers. Yeah, I find PTSD. And it was only until my therapist actually said to me, that is a trauma response. That is PTSD. That is everything that you're experiencing is so normal. It's what's happened to you. You were so out of control. So now you want to control absolutely everything. And not even in just that, in every aspect of my life, I want to be in control. And if I'm not, something bad's going to happen.
Yeah.
It's just trying to find out and ways of dealing with it. And therapy for me is one of the ones that I have therapy every 2 weeks. And honestly, if I didn't speak to her, I think I'd be an absolute hot mess. I'd continue with that. I am starting to try EMDR. Have you ever done EMDR?
Yeah, I have. Yeah.
I'm not entirely sure how I feel about it at the moment because I've only just gone into it. I can't stop laughing. And I feel like she's getting really annoyed at me because I've got the things in my hands and I feel like it's not working. I'm still having these thoughts. And so I don't know if I'm doing it right or if I'm just not allowing myself to, I don't know. I'm going to keep going at it though.
EMDR, my understanding, and I'm not an expert at all, but it's got similarities to CRE, which, it's shaking, but it's actually 7 sort of very light yoga positions that end up in a position where you're lying on the floor and you're allowing your legs just to shake a bit. And what I found with both of those things was I was thinking, what's going on here? What is it? This is ridiculous, isn't it? And when you do TRE, I'm often just chatting. I haven't done it for a while, but I worked with a practitioner. We were just chatting about stuff whilst this thing was happening to me. And I wasn't thinking about any of the stuff that I was there for. But then I found I was just feeling a bit better. And it's like I've released some of that stuff from my body, where it's stored as much as it is in my brain.
Talking of like physical aspect of it, I know we touched on health anxiety, but that's more of a psychological aspect of it. Have you had any physical changes since what happened to you? Because I've had a lot of physical issues and like illnesses and such. And it's only now that I realized that what happened to me, especially for instance, when I was going through the court process, I was so sick, physically sick, and I was in and out of hospital. And now I know that's why, even though it was presenting in a completely weird way and it was nothing really to do what happened. But yeah, I find that really interesting. So have you ever had any physical changes?
I don't think I have, but the thing that I'm aware, and I'm really aware of it at the moment, actually, because I've got some sort of other stress going on with other sort of parts of my life, but I'm aware of just how tense I am all the time. And how I tend to have a little short nap in the afternoons, and I've done this for years. And sometimes I don't even fall asleep. I just lie there with my eyes closed for 20 minutes, and it's like a recharge to my batteries. But I fairly recently, realised that my head was always slightly above the cushion.
Okay.
Because I'm holding it there. It's like I'm braced for even though I thought I was lying down, I wasn't. And so I think I have a habit of holding that tension in my body, and I think I've always done that. And the times when I am psychologically happiest are usually when I'm physically exhausted.
Yeah. That's funny, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah, definitely. When I'm feeling okay in myself and I'm having a really good day, my body is absolutely fucked. And I'm feeling really good. Mentally, I'm feeling really good, but my back and my neck, and I'm achy and I feel tired and sluggish. And I'm always trying to keep my shoulders back in because I'm all up here in my chest and I breathe quite heavily, anxiety and all that sort of stuff. So I need to try. And my neck is very similar. I have to go and get it clicked all the time because I've got so much tension. It just presents itself in all kinds of ways. I would really like to touch on, if you're okay to move on and you have nothing else to touch on, your advocacy work with, you're an ambassador for the Survivors Trust and your advocacy work with the NSPCC. That's where we obviously met. And just touch on your lived experience into the advocacy and how you got into it and your talks that you do and your work with the Survivors Trust, and kind of, I can imagine what drives you and why you want to do it, because that's why I want to do it. But yeah, what you do.
I think, I imagine our motivations and the sort of energy we get from doing those is very similar, because I often describe it as partly selfish in that I feel I get a lot from doing it, and people tell me they get a lot from sort of experiencing it or listening to what I have to say. So it feels win-win, really, from that point of view. Because of my work, I've had a little sort of public platform, and I know that there's lots of things in this world that I'm totally shit at, but I am, I think, quite good at talking about things and explaining things and describing things and sharing. And I really enjoy doing that, and I really enjoy facilitating others to do that as well. I love that. Feels like a sort of flow place for me. And so I do it because people tell me it helps them and helps others. I do it because it helps me, both kind of getting stuff out of me, but also knowing that I'm helping others helps me. And I do it because I know that anything I do that helps, even in a small way, to bring about some change. So, for instance, my work with the Survivors Trust, who are a wonderful organisation, last autumn was the 3-year anniversary of the ICSA inquiry publication and the 20 recommendations. And at that point, the 3-year anniversary, not one of the 20 recommendations made by the 7-year inquiry had been implemented. And we knew we needed to do something. And I was able to draw upon my skills and experience to help with that. And that was just so rewarding. And I know that it's already helping to bring about some change and some movement. We made a couple of short films. We had an event in Westminster, and I just want to make as much lemonade out of these lemons as I can.
Yeah.
My lemons and the lemons of other people as well. That feels like such a good thing to do.
Yeah.
And as I say, I do it for others and I do it for myself.
Yeah, definitely. And me too. I'm doing this for me. Like I said before, it's a really healing process, but there needs to be a lot of change. And if you have a voice and you're able to speak, because not everyone is there yet, if you're able to do it, I think it's incredible. And it takes a lot, and it is very brave to do it and stand up. But I know that when I do my speeches, like I said, I'm standing up on that stage and I'm doing it for me and little Chloe, but I'm also doing it for all those other people in that room where I know that it's 1 in 4, 1 in 5, I think it is. 1 in 4? Can't remember.
Yeah,
it's not a lot. It's a lot of people. And like the other day, about a month or so ago, I did a speech and there was about 350 people in the room. And I thought a lot of these people have experienced something that I've experienced, and they either haven't come forward or they're not ready to yet. And if I can spark one bit of change, like one person that feels the confidence to go, or she did it, or if he did it, then I can do it.
Yeah.
And that's how we make change, isn't it? That's how you start a movement. But I'm also very aware that not everyone is in the position where they can do that yet. And it's taken me a very long time to get here, a very long time. Back when I came forward in 2017, there is absolutely no way that I could be doing what I'm doing now. So when you do your speeches and your events and you're speaking to the public, what are the core messages you want people to walk away with?
These are such good questions. I don't ask questions as good as this. I suppose I want people to go away from like a talk I've given or whatever, feeling that they understand a little bit more about what it is and how it affects people and how it affects them as well. That's really important, actually. One of the things that I'm always so keen to point out is that no one is unaffected by sexual abuse, because people who commit crimes, people who are addicted to substances, people who display antisocial behaviour, problems in relationships, you don't usually have to dig too far to find trauma in those people's lives. And not all of it is trauma of sexual abuse, obviously, but it's more than well represented in those people and the trauma they've been through. And it costs, some people think in terms of money, and it costs billions every year just in the UK. It costs us billions every year dealing with the ripples outwards from sexual abuse.
Yeah.
In people not being able to work because of the way their trauma is affecting them. And that's a message I think people really need to hear. And then there is, and in fact, I'm on my way this afternoon up to the Midlands because I'm giving a talk tomorrow for an organisation to do this. There is a message that is even harder and in many cases less welcome for people to hear. And that is that if we're going to stop children being sexually abused, if we're going to have fewer victims, ideally none, but fewer, then we need to think about how we help perpetrators as well. And I know many people, whether they're victims themselves, aren't ready for that and don't like that and don't want to hear it and certainly don't want to be anywhere near it. I, for whatever reason, have always thought the way we deal with people isn't right. It isn't productive. Just doing what people do, which is to shout nonce and physically attack people and drive them into the darkness. That doesn't help victims. That makes more victims.
Yeah.
Because if people are completely isolated, can't get any help or support, they're going to offend. They're going to be more likely to offend. Whereas if we find ways of saying, you've done this awful thing, you need to first of all acknowledge that what you've done is awful and the harm and hurt you've done to people. But then we need to find ways to help you not do it ever again. And for some people, that's being in prison their whole lives. But for many people, it isn't. It's how can we give you the resources and help you be in a place where that isn't something that you're ever going to do again. And the other message we need to get out is, and it's hard in this country because there isn't much, there is some, but not much, is to those people who have those feelings and urges and that haven't yet done anything, but might, we need to say to them, we need to help you.
Yeah.
We don't do it in this country. There's one service that I can think of that's like everything else chronically underfunded. And people, when they hear about it, they go, what, help, what, hug a pedo? No, it's not that. It's, we want there to be fewer victims.
Yeah.
And one way we need to do that is to go, right, what do we do to help perpetrators not harm people?
Yeah. That's hard though, because you're trying to shift a completely different perspective. And when I find it difficult, don't get me wrong, I do find that difficult because I don't think I'll ever forgive him. I don't know. Never say never, but I'm not entirely sure right now. Definitely not right now. Probably because he has never admitted it and he still doesn't admit it. But it's hard because, like you were saying, most people are like, oh, a pedo, like pedos just need to do this. And they don't hang them, castrate them. And it is trying to change that perspective. And I think what you're doing is incredibly brave because, you know, someone that has experienced someone that was clearly a paedophile, a perpetrator, rapist, or whatever you want to call them, you know, you've experienced it firsthand, but you're still trying to change the narrative. And
really importantly, and I will say this if it's okay, I don't think you should ever feel like you have to forgive the man who abused you. Why the fuck should you? And I don't think I will, my perpetrator, weird thing to say, but he's dead now. And were he still alive, would I want to forgive him? Would I want to hear him say, I'm sorry? Maybe, but I don't think I'd ever forgive him. If he were alive, I wouldn't ever want to see him. I wouldn't want him anywhere near mine or anyone else's children. But that being said, I just want there to be fewer victims.
Yeah.
And I want fewer, ideally no people to experience what we've experienced.
Yeah. I think that changing that narrative, I've never really thought of it like that. And I don't think many people do. And that's...
I stuck my head above the parapet on this back in May last year. And I did it quite publicly on Twitter and LinkedIn. And I got death threats.
Jeez.
Saying it on Twitter and had to report them and everything. people obviously don't want to hear this, but to be honest, that made me more determined to have a conversation. And I won't say too much about it now, but there's a couple of things that I'm doing at the moment which are going to put that sort of front and center of the work I'm doing. And I know lots of people are going to be either uncomfortable or upset or both by it, but it just feels like an important thing to do. And I've got the ability to do that. And believe me, it's not easy, because it's meant having conversations with perpetrators.
Wow.
And it's not easy, but it's important for me.
I find it really interesting. And you were saying just then, if your perpetrator or the perpetrator that abused you was alive, would you forgive him, or would you even want to see him? And funnily enough, when I was in the court, I had the blind, so I couldn't see him.
Yeah. But
now I really want to see him, and I have no idea why. I don't know whether it's because I'm in this place now, but I sometimes have visions of me marching into the prison, sitting down and going, right, explain to me, why did you do it? Why? I know that's never going to be a possibility. It's never going to happen. So I kind of understand why you're seeing it from a different point of view, because as much as it's uncomfortable and it's hard to think about that, I think there's an element of, if we try and understand these people and we try and get them the help that they quite clearly need, because let's face it, it's not a normal thing to want to do, then there will be less victims, and people like us won't have to have been through what we've been through. Getting death threats is despicable and disgusting, but you're always going to get people like that, aren't you? It doesn't matter what
you are. And I know it's going to happen more as I'm getting more involved with this work, but it just makes me more determined. It makes it clearer to me that this is a conversation that lots of people, not everyone, but lots of people need to have. And I don't think it's a conversation that you or anyone else who's been through this ever needs to have if you don't want to, because why should you?
Yeah.
But I think there are people who need to, and as a society, we need to shift our thinking. I'm not talking ever about forgiving or understanding or explaining away these crimes, because fuck that. I'm talking about, this has happened. You need to be dealt with. You need to be punished for what you've done. And then we need to make sure you never do it again.
Yeah.
And
how are we going to do that?
And I don't believe for a second that most people who have those urges and those feelings want to be that person feeling like that. I know there are going to be exceptions to that. I know.
Of course.
But we need to help people.
Yeah. I think it's, like I said, it's incredibly brave of you, because it's a very different way of thinking about it. And you're going to get people that aren't going to agree with it. And you're going to get a lot of hate, which you obviously clearly have. But you being that voice for us, and I think people need to remember, you're not being a voice for them. It's not about, it's about helping them to also then, the main thing is to then help victims. So it's switching it and not going, no, you don't want to, they're not the priority, just shifting the perspective. But
precisely it.
Yeah. I think we've been talking for quite a while.
I'm sorry. I do have a tendency to go on a bit. So
me too. I could talk. I say this in every call that I'm on, and it always goes on far too long than I anticipated. And I always say I could talk for hours. I really could, which I also find, I know people might think, why do you want to talk about this for hours? But when you're passionate about something, you can talk about it till you're blue in the face. But I think it's probably a good place to, I'm sure you've got other things to get on with, and I think it's quite a nice place to end. But thank you so much for joining me and taking your time to be on the podcast today. I really appreciate it. Before you go, I always ask everyone, for the people that are listening right now, what piece of advice would you give to a survivor or a victim?
Do you mind if it's not advice, if it's just a statement?
Yeah.
And it's just
Absolutely.
that statement that I said earlier, which is, it shouldn't have happened.
Absolutely.
And there's loads of places and people who will give you advice on what to do to get help, and some of it will work for you and some of it won't. Ultimately, the thing I want you to remember is it shouldn't have happened.
Yeah, I think that's beautifully said. It shouldn't have happened. Thank you so much, Mark, for sharing your story and being so honest and open. And if anyone's listening, you can find Mark's podcast, Making Lemonade, on all the socials, I'm pretty sure. And yeah, thank you ever so much. I really appreciate it. And I'll hopefully see you and speak to you very soon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mark.